Hi everyone, welcome to our lecture on climate change and health. It's time for nurses to act. So we know climate change is a global challenge that will affect how we live and how we manage our healthcare system. The repercussions of climate change on health are just beginning to enter the public consciousness, and nurses need to be prepared for changes that will affect their practice, their lives, and the lives of their patients and families. As nurses, we instinctively know that patient health is closely tied to the patient's environment. And so this presentation on climate change and health urges you to consider the macro level of our environment, planet Earth. Over the coming decades, our rapidly changing climate will pose the biggest threat to human health and well-being across every region of our planet. According to the World Health Organization, the health effects of a changing climate are likely to be overwhelmingly negative. Climate change affects social and environmental determinants of health, such as clean air, safe drinking water, sufficient food, and secure shelter. Canada alone will not escape these consequences. According to leading international scientists, the world's nations have only 12 years left to dramatically reduce climate changing causing emissions, if we hope to prevent a devastating global increase in temperatures of at least 2 degrees Celsius. Given the scale of the threat that climate change poses to the health of humans and the environment, for current and future generations, nurses have a role to play as leading voices demanding change. So, humans are having a massive impact on the environment. This has been occurring at an accelerated pace since the Industrial Revolution. As a result of modern conveniences and easy access to energy derived from burning fossil fuels, humans have increased the concentration of greenhouse gases, in particular carbon dioxide, in our atmosphere. This has affected the balance between the incoming solar rays and the outgoing infrared radiation. The end result is that our atmosphere retains more heat, causing our planet to warm. The science can no longer be ignored. The human burnings of fossil fuels, such as oil, coal, gasoline, natural gas, etc., is driving up temperatures in our atmosphere, causing climate disruption and changing the livability and the health of the world around us. This is the story of climate change. If we are able to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and to capture some of the carbon that is in the atmosphere, we could keep the average rise in temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial levels. Given the challenge ahead of us, there is a sense of urgency to reduce our society's climate change footprint and to prepare for the challenges ahead. In 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, recommended a global target of no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in temperature to reduce the severity of the risk to our health and survival. Regardless of what we are able to achieve in reversing the trend, we are already seeing the health effects of a changing climate today. Climate change will affect everyone because extreme climatic events and a changing environment will be experienced everywhere. Nevertheless, our changing climate will disproportionately impact the most vulnerable groups globally and locally, so those who are socially, culturally, or economically disadvantaged, as they have the least resources to prepare and respond to exposures and shock events such as erratic weather, floods, or forest fires. The impact of climate change on the health of Canadians locally, and those globally is not as great as everywhere else in the world. So you can see by this map here, you can see the deaths attributed to climate change are more so in Africa. And so these are related to diarrheal disease from flooding, malaria because of vectors being migrating, so mosquitoes migrating further, fatal accidental injuries from floods and cyclones and tornadoes, and malnutrition because of the droughts. And so these are mainly occurring in low-income countries. So globally and domestically, erratic and extreme weather patterns are having a profound effect on our communities. But low-income countries, where people are already living in precarious situations, are being affected the most from droughts, floods, and extreme weather, as demonstrated by the cyclone in Mozambique. Droughts in West Africa are threatening millions because of the severe climate change and lack of water, and the heat is ruining their farming. And so these individuals are subsistence farmers, and they live to farm in order to live. And so if we look at this map, we looked at the top map already, deaths attributed to climate change, but look at where the greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. They're coming from North America. They're coming from China. They're not coming from Africa at all, the continent of Africa. And so this is what we call climate justice. And so climate change is a social justice issue because the countries that are producing the most CO2 are not the ones being affected by the issue of climate change. And so if we look at Canada versus the world, Canada makes up less than 1/2 of the world's population, but we are the world's 8th largest producer of greenhouse gases. So we can't be excused from the countries that are producing large amounts of greenhouse gas emissions. So who are the most vulnerable in Canadian society? And so within Canada, some populations are more vulnerable to negative impacts of climate change than others. Vulnerable groups in Canadian society are already in the greatest need of nursing care, and now nurses will need to direct their skills to help build more resilient communities and to become strong advocates demanding action on climate change to ensure a healthy future. Children, people with chronic diseases, specifically cardiorespiratory distress from air pollution due to wildfires, increased respiratory ailments due to intensifying ground level ozone and air pollution, people living in inadequate housing, those who struggle to pay their energy bills, and those who are already suffering from food insecurity will be most affected. Decreasing access to and availability of food due to fluctuations in agricultural yields and food prices are going to increase food costs. Canada's food costs for the average Canadian family is expected to increase by $400 in 2019, rising to $12,000 per year, with the increasing cost of vegetables continuing to be an important factor. Health Canada estimated in 2017 that 9,500 deaths per year in Canada were attributed to poor air quality. In that same year, British Columbia had the worst wildfire season on record, and in northern Alberta, the fire that burned for 3 months released over 77 megatons of carbon. That is nearly half of the emissions that Canada needs to reduce to reach its targets. The science predicts a future with more frequent and intense heat waves in Canada without the reprieve of cooler nights. And that's going to lead to more extreme heat waves and higher rates of heat stroke and stress. And you can see these cooling centers that took place in 2018 when we were going through extreme heat waves. Floods and once-in-a-century storms are also becoming more frequent. In 2018, New Brunswick experienced the worst floods in decades, causing many people to lose their homes. Displacement from wildfires and floods is also accompanied by mental distress and loss. Allergy-induced asthma. So millions of men, women, and kids suffer from symptoms of asthma that make their quality of life low and cause difficulties for them. While there are many causes of asthma, the symptoms of this pulmonary ailment are triggered with exposure to allergens in the case of many individuals. And so we're going to see increased allergens from more intense and prolonged pollen seasons, exacerbating asthma sufferers' health conditions. Among the 194 countries analyzed, Canada has the third highest rate of new traffic-related asthma cases. And the individuals that are going to be affected by these are our new childhood asthma cases and our older aging population that are already suffering with COPD. As carbon dioxide accumulates in the atmosphere, Canada's oceans are also becoming more acidic because of the chemical reactions at the surface. This acidification is negatively affecting the ability of shellfish to build their shells, threatening vast fisheries across Canada. Lyme disease cases in Canada have more than doubled, and Lyme disease are caused by black-legged ticks, and they are present all across Ontario. And Lyme disease is a serious illness that, when left untreated, can lead to recurring arthritis, neurological problems, numbness, and paralysis. And this is related to more heat, and that these black-legged ticks are actually spreading their migration patterns. And then Indigenous peoples are living on the front lines of climate change because of their close proximity to their environment and the use of their environment to actually live and grow food. As parts of the planet become increasingly unlivable, there will be climate refugees arriving in Canada, and this will place additional pressure on resettlement agencies, our social safety nets, and the healthcare system. And then lastly, eco-anxiety. Under the looming threats of climate change, an emerging sense of imminent and inescapable crisis is gripping the emotional and social well-being of our communities. The growing climate kids movement, which was highlighted in a famous speech by 14-year-old Greta Thunberg before world leaders during the 24th UN Framework Conference on Climate Change in 2018, is an expression of eco-anxiety. There have been multiple student protests around the world, and there is a renewed sense of urgency in news stories around the need to do something, to act now. Society is in a precarious position as we realize the full cost of industrialization, rapid growth, and extended lifespan. The world is struggling to visualize a hopeful future. As a society, we must face the fact that we have created a public health emergency. And so, rising global temperatures put everyone's health at risk. As nurses, we have a moral duty to prepare for the effects of a climate changing system so we can work alongside our patients, our clients, and communities to build resistance. Nurses also have a moral duty to advocate for meaningful action on climate change by governments, to call for a solid plan to lower emissions and build a healthier and more sustainable society for our future. So I want you to pause here and look at the recommendations to nurses from the Canadian Nurses Association. Lastly, I want to end up with climate change and your patients. Just a few ideas for yourself. So smog and cardiovascular disease. There is a strong evidence that exposure to air pollution leads to increased morbidity and mortality due to cardiovascular disease. And you will start to see this in your nursing career here in Canada, in Ontario, where you'll see that on poor air quality days, there will be more hospitalizations or mortality due to cardiovascular disease. And so people coming in with heart attacks. And so smog is one of the most recognizable air quality control problems. And so we're seeing this more and more in Canada. And so what is smog? Well, the major components of smog are particulate matter and ozone. And particulate matter is emitted directly into the atmosphere from such sources as cars, trucks, factories, wood burning, and fossil fuels. Now, in Canada, 30% live in communities with high particulate matter, and 40% live in communities with high ozone layers. And what the difference is that in cardiovascular disease, the main problems seem to be particulate matter, whereas in respiratory disease, ozone is more of a trigger. And so we see these on our poor air quality days. And so nursing practice. What are ways nurses can help protect the health of people with cardiovascular disease and other respiratory diseases from smog? The first thing is that being aware and teaching clients about air quality index in their community. And so you can actually go on this website and click to the region that you live in and look at what the air quality index is for the day. And people who have cardiovascular disease and other respiratory ailments can actually go to this website and look every day and stay inside on those days that the air quality index is high. So teaching patients about that. Teaching clients as ways to reduce smog. So avoid or reduce strenuous outdoor activities when smog levels are high. Avoid or reduce exercises near areas of high traffic, especially during rush hour. And then nursing practice 3 is promoting steps to reduce emissions. So use public transportations, alternative to gas-powered machines and vehicles, fuel efficiency when buying a vehicle, reducing energy in your home, decreasing outside burning, and advocate, advocate, advocate. So that is the final part of our presentation on climate change and health and the role of nurses.